and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by the guy who fell out of the helicopter at the very beginning of the podcast. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Hey, everybody, let me just grab the whoa!
You know, he's fine, by the way. And they didn't tell you that in the movie, but that guy, he didn't break his back or anything. He recovered completely a few days later, and he's totally fine.
And it's all his fault.
It is. Yeah,
I do want to emphasize that the whole debacle is his fault.
The debacle we're referring to is, of course, the 2001 Ridley Scott film Black Hawk Down, because it is time for episode 13 of our continuing series discussing and deconstructing the films of Ridley Scott. So this week on the podcast, we're going to be talking all about Black Hawk Down. Then, what we were supposed to do last week, but we were having technical difficulty, so we didn't. We are going to be talking about the results from the Doof Canon episode from a couple weeks ago on the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. We want to talk about those results and maybe talk about some of your reactions to what we talked about. And then I thought we would wrap everything up this week, Matt, by talking about a movie that you and I saw last weekend that we both quite enjoyed. We're going to spend a brief amount of time at the end of the podcast talking about the newest Predator film called Prey.
Sounds great.
It sounds like a pretty nice little show there, doesn't it?
It does.
All right, let's get the horrible, horrible incident over first and talk all about Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down.
These people, they have no food. We can either help, or we can sit back and watch a country destroy itself on CNN.
Rangers, Deltas, today we go.
Name?
Blackburn.
Date of birth?
2/27/75.
I was trained to fight. Were you trained to fight, Sergeant?
I was trying to make a difference.
So guess what?
You're going out today.
What?
It's what you wanted, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Just remember when everybody else is shooting the same direction.
Matt, what is this mess all about?
The story of 160 elite U.S. soldiers who dropped into Mogadishu in October 1993 to capture two top lieutenants of a renegade warlord, but found themselves in a desperate battle with a large force of heavily armed Somalis.
Yeah, you could call it a battle. You could call it that.
Yeah.
This movie was written by Ken Noland, based on the book by Mark Bowden. It was directed by Sir Ridley Scott, and it stars, Matt, everybody. Literally throughout this movie. I remember this being a movie that had a lot of people in it, but it just kept happening. We're like, oh, it's that guy. Oh, and it's that guy. Oh, and it's that guy.
Yeah. Well, the funniest part to me is I thought I had hit the limit of guys, and then I was like, wait a minute, Jamie Lannister is in this movie? Yeah. I was like, I don't think he was in anything else that I'd ever seen until Game of Thrones.
Nope, he was in it. He was here. Of course, also Ewan McGregor, Josh Hartnett, Tom Sizemore. Tom Sizemore, who from Saving Private Ryan on, I think just became gruff badass in war character that always gets injured but just keeps going anyway. That's just the character Tom Sizemore always played. He's back doing it again here. The astonishing thing is just how many non-American actors are playing American characters in this movie. All of them.
It's pretty funny. They're all and with varying degrees of success in their accent. Lots of great British guys doing Southern American accents in this film.
Yeah, I also didn't know Tom Hardy played a role in this movie.
I didn't. Yeah, I double taked. I was like, Is that a young Tom Hardy?
It is.
And I mean, what's funny is he's always such a chameleon actor that he really did disappear into this role, even though it's pretty, minor role.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great.
Varying successes of American accents, though. I think Jamie Lannister, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau, not the best American accent he had there. I think he gets the British accent down in time for Game of Thrones, but you could definitely tell he's got his little I think he's from Scandinavia, right?
Yeah,
you could tell he's got his little Scandinavian I don't know what to call it, draw there for sure.
Yeah. It was only distracting because I knew about him though. So
yeah, definitely. But what did you think of this movie, Matt? I'm looking forward to talking to you about this movie because I found this movie pretty confounding, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a lot to say about it, actually, which is a bit surprising to me. So okay, let set the stage, set the framing. Okay,
Sure.
I've only seen it once before, and that was when it was in theaters
Mhm.
1,000 years ago. And the only thing I really remembered about the movie was the horrific scene, maybe the goriest, most disgusting scene in all cinema, possibly, where you have men reaching into like the like pelvic cavity of a horribly injured soldier to pull his femoral artery out with little clippy things so they can try to seal the artery while it's spurting blood, and there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And everyone's dirty and bloody, and then the kid dies anyway because they couldn't get the artery because it was too slippery. And this is your war movie, right? This is the headline image of your war movie is this horribly sad, gross, violent image that sticks with you forever. And then embedded within that, the movie around it is just this cacophonous nightmare.
Yeah.
It's just machine gun fire for like 2 solid hours, and then like 10 minutes of talking at the beginning and end.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nightmare, and like, but like on purpose, right?
Yeah.
So that's my comment. That's my opening salvo.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my head, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie too. In my head, I built this up as an action film, like a war action movie, in which we have our heavily outnumbered soldiers battle back against the forces inside the city, and it's going to be exciting. And it is not exciting. It is awful. It is watching things go wrong one after another, and looking at these guys just being like, what the fuck are we going to do now? And the answer is nothing. They're not going to do anything. And I think that you using the femoral artery scene as like an example of the movie at large is perfect, because that scene ends in failure, right? They do not clamp the artery. They do not stop the bleeding. The soldier dies. And that's the movie. The triumph at the end of the movie is, hey, we limped out of the danger zone. We didn't solve anything. We didn't stop the bad guy. We didn't end the civil war in Somalia. We just lived. We managed to live, and that's the closest to victory we can get, is we managed to survive. Of course, 19 men did not. They died, which by the way, I think the thing that always was remarkable to me watching this movie and reading about it was that more people didn't die, based on like how outnumbered they were and how like just completely shit showy it was. That I mean, 19 people is still a lot of people, and also we should say 1,000 Somalians is what the text at the end of the movie says. A lot of people died here, but I really thought more American soldiers would have died based on what Ridley Scott shows us in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives you that impression. Yeah, I think it reminds me of another war film I saw recently where it's like you emphasize the level of like felt danger of the characters by having just like people just unloading, belt-fed machine guns like constantly, and it's like there probably wasn't nearly this much actual shooting happening in real life. Like if there had been, it's just hard to imagine that they would have killed everyone, right? And they would have run out of ammunition is actually the more likely outcome. Like you can't actually fire these belt-fed machine guns that they're carrying around for that long, right? These are stupid details that you're not thinking about while you're watching the movie, of course. It doesn't matter. Like you could have made like a Doctor Strangelove-esque like dark comedy version of this movie that just focuses on the like slapstick ridiculousness of the whole premise. Because what you have is one of these movies that was really hard for us to understand, I think, at the age we were at, and also the fact that this came pretty shortly after Saving Private Ryan, where Saving Private Ryan is like, this is a just war, this is a good war, these are our boys, they're dying tragically, but they're dying for something greater than themselves. And then this movie is taking most of that and inverting it, but keeping the element of like, these are our boys, we love our boys, it's really sad when they die. However, the thing that they were asked to do, the mission they were tasked with, was stupid, like front to back in its entirety, top to bottom. And then every detail of like the command implementation of that mission was stupid, and then every command level response was like mismanaged and politically influenced, and our boys were left hanging out to dry. And it's,
I mean, the entire fact that a man is out there with his femoral artery cut open and bleeding to death, and they're in radio contact with support who could send a helicopter to come lift that guy out, and they're like, no, we can't risk the equipment we have, is like, it's infuriating in a lot of ways. It's just like, you let this guy die. You let him die. And yeah, the whole thing is a shit show. And I think, you know, when we talked about Idiocracy, we talked about it in the frame of when it came out. I think that's really important for this movie as well, because this movie came out, it says 2001. I think it was a limited release in 2001 to make it in time for Oscars, but the movie came out in January of 2002, which is after 9/11, a pretty big event in our country's history. And it's actually wild to me watching this movie in the context of 9/11, because I do think a lot of people went to this movie with 9/11 on their mind, and it became this kind of jingoistic America fuck yeah thing. But I think they were wrong in that read. I completely agree with you. It's wild to me that a movie this anti, you know, military complex came out in the wake of 9/11. Like the seemingly point of this whole movie is, what the fuck were we doing over there? Why were we doing this? What the fuck is this mission? This is all fucked and political. And I mean, this thing was like a big black spot on Clinton's very early presidency. Like this, he did not come out of this thing looking good at all, because he's the one that ordered this whole thing to happen. And it's wild to me in that context. And I think, you know, part of me living in 2022 with hindsight says, I wish this movie went a little more textual in its ripping apart of all the decisions made here. But I think, again, to put this in context, we were talking about this before we started recording. This is in the same time frame where the Dixie Chicks were canceled off the face of the planet for saying that they were embarrassed that the president was from Texas. So, like, the idea that anyone would be speaking up against the United States and its military in this immediate aftermath of this great tragedy at 9/11 is kind of wild to me, actually.
Yeah. Well, it is funny to me because, you know, this movie came out when we were basically 21, 22-ish. Wait, is that right? No, that's not right at all.
No, we were 16, 17.
16, 17.
We were just about the age of Orlando Bloom's character that immediately falls out of the helicopter.
You're right. It's really funny how bad I am at math, but yes. And I totally didn't process it like the way that it is obviously meant to be read, like the way that I'm reading it now. Like I read it as basically like, well, a war movie, right? Like almost every war movie is sort of the same tradition where it's like, look at, you know, the honor and goodness of the men willing to put themselves on the line for the values of truth, justice, and the American way. And the movie's not really doing that, because it's basically saying, yeah, look at these great men and look at how their lives have been wasted by this stupid, like, jingoistic interventionism. Like it's an anti-war war movie, right? There are some like that. I'm not saying this is like the only anti-war war movie.
Sure.
But it is. I think it muddies itself a little bit. You know, toward the end, you have this stuff where it's like, you know, I didn't set out to be a hero, but, you know, you become a hero, and and we're doing it for the man next to you, and it's sort of things that are typical war movie tropes. But it's like, why don't we emphasize the fact that none of this had to happen at all? Right. Like, Eric Bana, maybe you should be a little bit more disgusted that this was actually a waste of life for no, like this is just. I think I'm focusing on Eric Bana's character because he has this like sanguine attitude of like it's war, man, it happens, and
this is the way it is.
This is the way it is, and you do it for the men, and it's like, why are you like? I know from listening to some, you know, military people that like they actually have a conception of like what wanting to fight in wars that are actually worthwhile.
Sure.
Like they don't want to actually throw their lives away for nothing because they're humans like everyone else. So So anyway, yeah, I do think maybe that was some like intentional hedging done so that the movie wasn't, canceled off the face of the earth. I don't know.
Perhaps, but I don't know. I read that, and maybe this is my own personal beliefs influencing the way I read the movie, but I read that as kind of sad because I think you have the Eric Bana character who is like I don't really give a shit about why we're here. I'm a warrior. All I care about is the fight and the man next to me. And you have him kind of put directly in contact with the Josh Hartnett character, which we're told at the beginning of the movie is the idealist. He's the one that believes we're out here for a reason and it's a good reason and we're doing good. And like by the end of the movie, I think Bana's like, no, man, like you can't do that. Like if you're trying to find idealism in this stuff, you're doing it wrong. And I think the movie says he's right. And I think we're not supposed to feel good about that. Like, I don't think we're supposed to look at Eric Bana as like very casual, like eating food while loading up again to go back out there and kill 1,000 more people with this completely indifferent attitude. Like he doesn't care about anything, but he's like ridiculously good at his job. I don't know. That to me was not like, yeah, go troops. It was, that's sad. Look what this thing has done to this man. And also like Eric Bana or Josh Hartnett. Look what it's done to him. It's killed the idealist. The idealist went to Somalia thinking that what the United States was doing there was good. We were going to help people. We were going to feed people. We were going to save people. And it was the right thing to do. And it was a worthy thing to sacrifice our life for. And he leaves the thing going like, I mean, like you become like, I don't see him as an idealist at the end of that movie. I see him as a person who's had that idealism beaten out of him.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like, I do think that reading is not only there, it's probably the intended reading, and it might be the reading that I would have had off the bat if I'd seen this movie for the first time now, instead of having that memory.
I do agree that it hedges, though. I think you're totally right that it hedges a little bit. That like we don't want people like we're not going to go fully there because we're still going to have a movie that like calls these men heroes and honors them for their heroism and yeah, go soldiers. Like this is very much in the Michael Bay philosophy of patriotism, which is the soldiers are awesome and we love them. It's the complex that surrounds them that is awful. Like that's like people call Michael Bay incorrectly, I think, like a jingoistic, like America fuck yeah type of director in his stories. And if you actually look at the stories he tells, it's always about how the individual soldier is great. The military as a unit is corrupt and awful, actually.
Yeah. I agree. So yeah, I think it deserves like a solid B plus actually on the like thematic execution front. Like this is not this is not one of the bad Ridley Scott films.
No,
I would say it's maybe we sound negative in some regards, and that's because the movie's like actually unpleasant.
It is actively unpleasant to watch. Yeah,
and that's totally on purpose. And that's like it's like like. The noise, like I was like, I'm gonna have hearing trouble after this film, and I'm only hearing like gun sound effects. It's just relentless, I guess we can talk about just the execution because it's as an action film, it's pretty incredible, right? Like,
yeah, it's remarkably filmed. Like it's so good at doing everything it wants to do, which is film the action in a way that's clear but also terrifying and confusing and overwhelming. And yeah, he does a lot of things that I don't think we've seen from Ridley, which is he does a lot of the guerrilla style. We're trying to make it seem like the cameraman is there in the middle of the action. I think there's moments where like there's a lot of moments in this movie, Matt, I don't know if you noticed this, where things are blocking parts of the frame. Like there's just stuff in the way and where the frame isn't look as neat and pretty as you think you'd see in a Ridley Scott movie. And then of course there's moments where like the cameraman, like you see the camera fall down when the soldiers fall down. So there's a lot of very specific kind of filmmaking here that I think is remarkably effective in getting what Scott wants to do here. Yeah,
there's a lot of artistry. I remember the one shot where you've got a character running and the camera is following right at his heels. Yeah. Like you feel like an inch off and the camera would just bang right into his heels.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of artistic stuff like that. It's very, very, very functional. Like you said, you can always tell where you are geographically, or if you can't, then it's like an intentional sense of confusion and disorientation. Let's see what else. I mean, it does a really good job of like keeping track of like the time of day with lighting and location. And like one thing that I noticed a lot this time was kind of reminded me of Aliens, actually, where it very efficiently introduces quite a number of characters. And I'd be lying if I said I remembered any of their names. I totally don't. But like, I could keep them straight. Like, okay, these are the two like badass Delta Force guys. That's Eric Bana. These guys are all sort of more greenhorns. Okay, Ewan McGregor is the typist who doesn't know what he's doing, right? Like you can go through all of the characters and be like, yep, this is where we met them. This is their deal. This guy has kids. This guy's in charge, right? Like it very easy to keep it all straight. They do a really good job introducing them, and then they make it really easy to keep track of as you go, and kind of give every character their own little individualized either death or resolution of some form.
Totally.
And I found that pretty impressive considering how many characters we're talking about and just how intense and insane this movie is in general.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you know, we have the one guy who's doing the impression of I don't remember their ranks, but the Jason Isaacs character who's playing, I think Colonel Steele, maybe. He's doing an impression of him, and Steele sees him do it, and then he's the one that gets hit and killed in the gunner seat on the Humvee very early in the movie. And like, because we took that 15 minutes at the beginning of the movie to really set all these up, and you're right, set them up very loosely in like archetypal, like this is the guy that does this is the guy that does this, and that's all we need to know. That death means something because we connect who that guy is and his relationship to the other characters. And we do this really great thing where when Jason Isaacs sees it or hears about it, he reacts. We allow us to cut to a reaction of him reacting to that death. And that reminds us that, oh yeah, they had this thing, this kind of comedy beat as we get to see the soldiers just live their everyday life back at base camp. Remarkably efficient, remarkably effective, that we took that time, that 15 minutes at the beginning before everything goes to shit. I loved it. It made everything clear. Also, the fact that every one of them is a recognizable actor really helps you keep them apart in your head as well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But no, yeah, you're totally right. Very well done. I think the Aliens comparison is apt, that we understand who these men are very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's funny because there's the ones who weren't recognizable faces went on to become recognizable faces, which is funny to me.
Yeah, totally.
There's also a funny mix of like heartthrob, chiseled, handsome dudes, and then like kind of weird looking dudes. You know, like your stable of kind of funny looking actors.
I believe we kindly call those character actors.
The character. We got the character actors and we got the leading men, and you know, we use them intelligently. You know, it's I think just like sheer like effort level, right? Like I'm trying to think of other, you know, every other war movie I can think of. There's usually, you know, maybe at most like a third of the movie will be actual war. Most of it will be setting up the characters and so forth. This movie, like we just said, it very efficiently sets up the characters, but then you've got like at least an hour and a half. Like you got a huge amount of just fighting and action and you know, actors firing prop guns and explosions, like, which are all practical, you know, in 2001, like practical explosions and RPGs and helicopters, which are almost certainly real helicopters doing real things most of the time. And I guess there must have been some CG. I don't know, fake some of this stuff, but
I don't know how you crash land a helicopter. Of course, I think very intentionally every time the Blackhawks crashed, we cut to a like satellite footage of the Blackhawk crashing, which is a clever way of getting around actually having to crash a helicopter.
Yeah. But I mean, no, you know, spared no expense, generally speaking. Like it looks incredible. It's like, God, just like so intense. And this is my recollection of watching it the first time, is just like coming out of the theater drained and exhausted and miserable. Because, you know, first of all, I'm not exaggerating. Like the artery scene was just absolutely harrowing, especially if you don't know that going into the movie.
Yeah.
But then just overall, the movie is just like a battering ram on your senses.
Yeah.
And Ridley knows that.
Absolutely. I think this was all very intentional. I have a very distinct memory of walking out of this movie saying, that was great. I never want to watch it again. And obviously I have now. But yeah, I mean, like, I think it is pretty remarkable that, like, the one biggest criticism you see of war movies, especially anti-war war movies, is that they all kind of inherently become pro-war because you're showing war and trying to make an entertaining film. It is remarkable to me how not entertaining this movie is. And again, I don't mean that as a slight. I think it's an extremely well-made movie. It's just not fun to watch. It's just like, it's anxiety inducing. Like, you are like, the movie does such a good job of putting you in the position of the soldiers. Like, every time something else happens that fucks with everything, you're just like, oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
Can we, no.
Right.
Like when the original convoy is trying to find a way to get to the crash site and they're relaying instructions to them and they're getting lost, you're so frustrated. You're so frustrated. Like, you have the bird's eye view. Just tell him where to turn. And like, again, and that's a great commentary on the uselessness of this whole thing, that like the person in the air is relaying instructions from someone else not even up there. And so it's delayed and useless. The orders that they're being given are just not helpful at all. And it's so frustrating to watch.
Yeah. I don't know the name of that one actor who was sort of like the middleman on the radio, who would just constantly be delivering like the bad news, be like, no, they're not going to be able to come get you. Well, you're just going to have to make it through somehow.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, oh my God, like this, like you're getting no support. You're getting the sense of frustration of these guys.
Yeah.
You know, I actually forgot that a second helicopter crashed. Like, I just forgot that about the movie or about the story, that like the second helicopter crashes after they're already trying to evacuate the people from the first helicopter. And you're like, oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
And
now
then
they have to go to a second crash site. Yeah.
Right. And they're like, and they can't even really mount a full rescue. There's basically just like two guys are like, okay, we're the badasses. We're going to go rescue the crash. And then the two badasses are killed.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, like if you were constructing this as like an action movie, they totally would have like won, right? But no,
right.
It's not realistic.
They're killed like immediately, right? Yeah. Like I think my brain remembered them hanging on for a while, but yeah, they drop down, they pull the pilot out of the helicopter and put him to the side, and then they go fight and just immediately die, just like right away. And it's like, oh, I also liked in that instance, you know, you have the general that talks to them and is like, son, do you understand what you're asking from me to let you do? And they're like, yes, we totally understand. And he thinks for a minute, and then he goes and tells his subordinate, it's your call. And I was like, wait a minute, Sam Shepard, you can't just push that off on someone else. You make the call. You're the general. Make the call.
The general character is interesting because I feel like the movie kind of can't make up its mind over whether it's trying to condemn the general or maybe it is just condemning the general. And I don't know, because like I'm thinking about how, you know, sort of all is his fault because he never should have greenlit this mission because it was a bad mission. And then and he's and like there's this thing where he's like whining about like being under pressure and like from the politicians, and it's like, okay, that's not like, deal with it, that's your job. And then at the end of the movie he's like mopping up the blood in the infirmary, and this is kind of a symbolic gesture of like he's aware of all the blood that's on his hands, right?
Yeah.
Or the movie is making you aware that the blood is on his hands, maybe you could say.
Well, the character in real life, the man in real life, took full responsibility for everything that happened that day. And he kind of retired in not disgrace, but he, you know, I think not like he did not have like an illustrious end to his career. He took full responsibility for this. Of course, the entire political apparatus like needs to find someone to blame, right? And we can't blame the president because that's politics. So we're just going to blame this general. It wasn't that the mission was inherently stupid. It was that he specifically carried it out stupidly. I mean, I think you're right that the movie kind of wants it both ways. And I think part of that is intentional to me, that like it's partially his mismanagement of this whole thing, his underestimation of the stupidness of this mission. It's partially like they didn't get the equipment and stuff that they wanted. Like I think the movie takes time to show that they requested different gunships for this mission, and all that they were given were Blackhawks, which a Black Hawk helicopter is like a nighttime stealth mission, quiet copter. It is not made to be like a middle of the day hovering over a bright city and it's black paint, easy target for RPGs from all the crevices around the city thing. Like, they had the wrong equipment for the job. And of course that happened because of that. And so I don't know, man. I just think like, I think the movie wants you to be thinking about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely. I'm trying to remember what kind of helicopter it was that crashed in the Bin Laden raid. Yeah, it was a Black Hawk helicopter. Black Hawks just suck in general.
No, they're like fucking. they're fucking like stealth copters. Like the Bin Laden mission was a Black Hawk doing what the Black Hawk was supposed to be doing, which is doing night. Like, it's painted black and you're in the desert,
but it still crashed. But anyway, yes, well,
well, the thing. I mean, let's say the thing about helicopters is they're remarkably easy to crash because like both of those helicopters, it was not a direct hit, right? You just ping the tail rudder and the whole thing stops functioning.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and then when it comes to like the ground convoy, I guess they had pretty good armor, but they were fighting against just like a crap load of guys with RPGs, and just overall, you know, I think there's like a moment in the movie where, see, now we're doing a literal armchair quarterback analysis of the battle that happened like 30 years ago. But there's a moment where everything turns south and then it just gets worse from there. And that moment is, I guess it's when the helicopter is shut down.
I think it's when the Black Hawk is down.
Yeah, I think ironically, it's when the Black Hawk is down. But like everything up to that point, it's like it could have been okay. And I think you could also argue that was it Orlando Bloom that falls out of the helicopter?
Yeah,
Orlando Bloom, who, you know, okay, speaking of this being an anti-war movie, he's like your gung-ho 18-year-old who's like, I'm gonna be the badass. I'm gonna get some. And then his sole contribution to the battle is to fall out of the helicopter and then basically derail everything, which then leads to the Black Hawk being shot down, which then leads to everything else. So like, yeah, like it's an incredibly fragile mission that like admits no errors. And because one minor error happened, it snowballed. Right. So like that's the way in which it was a badly designed mission, is that there was no fallback option if it didn't go perfectly.
Yeah, and there's this weird thing that I think missions like this, and we've been pretty political so far, and it's hard to, when it's a movie about a real political blunder that our country was involved in. Like, we didn't want to go to war with Somalia. We wanted to like come in and do this like halfway interventionist thing, so we have all these special forces troops on the ground, and that's really it. We don't have like the full military apparatus supporting them, right? And so like in the back of your head, you're like, why aren't there fucking tanks and like full gunships worth of helicopters just coming in and completely covering them from every angle at all times? And it's because we wanted to do this like very small incursion thing for political reasons, right? And it's incredibly frustrating that, like, again, like, you know, you look at this thing and the rather long text crawl at the beginning of this movie like lays out the case that like there's a civil war happening here, and hundreds of thousands of people are starving to death, and you, a person, like instinctively want to go, well, we need to help them. Like, of course we need to help them. Like, we have food, they do not have food. Let's make sure they get food. And of course the complicated nature of that, it's not that simple, right? This is a whole country with their whole thing that's going on internally that we are not going to fix magically by just dropping 20,000 soldiers on the ground and saying, okay, you have to do what we say now. That's not going to happen. And it's so complicated. And like, even if there was an idealistic reason at the beginning of this whole thing, like that goes away. And I think that's what we get to see one scene with a Somalian soldier talking to the captain. That's where he says the line, "In Somalia, killing is negotiating," which I remember solely because this is a really random story, Matt, but I was playing EverQuest with a guy in 2002 who would say that phrase over and over again because he thought it was funny. Like he would just say, like, just type in chat, in Somalia, killing is negotiating. And so like that's one of the everlasting images of this movie in my head because of Keglu from EverQuest. So that's
shout out to Keglu.
Shout out to Keglu. But I think that's what we're trying to say with this movie is that like I think he says the line, it's like, if you kill our general, like, what do you think, we're just gonna be done? You think we're just gonna stop now? It's like, no, of course not. Like there's multiple factions in this country vying for power, and you eliminate one, that doesn't mean the fighting will stop. So it's like, how do we help these people but also not make 19 of our boys die for no reason at all? You know, it's there's no clear answer here, and I don't think the movie wants to have a clear answer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's gesturing at something that I think all Americans became a lot more familiar with as the, aughts went on, which is like, oh, we didn't actually understand the situation that we were getting into. Like we thought it was a lot simpler. It was actually portrayed as being a lot simpler to us. And we said, yeah, sure. It sounds like we can just send in this surgical strike of our guys. Oh, you've named this guy, he's the bad guy. Okay, we'll take out the bad guy who you've explained is bad. And as far as we can tell, it seems like everything will be fine. And then, this character is trying to explain, like, hey, this is like a civil war. Just because there's one general, like, and the general's name doesn't mean you understand the civil war. And, this is misguided. You shouldn't be here. I don't think, personally, I wasn't like, I didn't have the world knowledge to understand that message when this movie came out.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
I think I dare say,
I wonder
most
how much
Americans
of our country, how much our country had the world knowledge. Yeah, this is pre-Iraq. This is the 90s, where us kind of closing our eyes and imagining we're the king of the world. And we're gonna help everyone. I mean, like, probably people. I don't know. I don't know how well known what happened in Somalia was to the average American. I mean, I can easily say I didn't know anything about it, but that's because I was 8 years old. So I don't know. I think it certainly, in retrospect, looks bad and looks like part of a trend that was going to continue on with our interventionism throughout the last 30 years. But man, I don't know.
Seems safe to say that we didn't, that we as a people didn't know, much about what happened. I mean, I think the typical American worldview is that the rest of the world operates just like America, except maybe it has problems every once in a while. And then, if you send troops in and they fix the problem,
help fix them.
Yeah. Right. Like, that's, at least I think that was the attitude in the 90s, because like the media landscape of the 90s was very centralized. And so you just kind of believed what you were told.
Sure. I think it is worth saying that the Somali people did not care for how they were depicted in this movie. It is interesting that there really are no Somali characters in this movie. I mean, you have that one guy, I don't even know his name, the one guy who talks to the pilot. I don't know. What do you think about this? I mean, I don't think it's particularly kind to the Somali people. Like, the only people we really see are, people in the streets with automatic weapons shooting at our boys. So I think one thing the movie is not really trying to do is get us to understand what it's like to be a Somali citizen living in Mogadishu at this time.
No, it's not trying to do that at all. I mean, here's the thing. I don't know what you do to solve that, other than something really radical and extreme, like you have, multiple main Somali characters who are on the other side of the battle, and that just changes the entire movie, right? Because then you're following around totally different characters who are attacking our soldiers, and then it feels totally different. And I'm not like, that's the thing. It's like, well, maybe that would have been good too, but it's like, okay, but that's a totally different movie that we're talking about now.
Definitely.
I mean, it definitely does what you're saying. The movie definitely kind of dehumanizes them into like a mass. There's like a swarm that are just, running up, firing wildly, and then getting like picked off with the precision rifle shot. And like, you feel nothing about it because it's filmed in a way where it's designed for you to feel nothing about it,
Yeah.
right? You do feel something when your dude who you care about gets shot, though. So
Yeah, I mean, I remember having, very distinct memories of the scene where they're kind of coming in to kill the pilot in the helicopter, and like how they're like jumping, like I just remember the guy who ends up shooting him with his pistol like jumps into the air and lands, and like I just very distinct memory of this like the men just rushing this helicopter to kill this pilot in there, and like animalistically like leaping through the air and jumping and firing. And it's like the way Ridley Scott shoots this movie certainly makes at least the people that they're fighting look like violent. I don't want to say savages, that seems too harsh, but just kind of a violent mob of people, certainly.
Yeah. There's that. There's also the fact that very often their faces are covered with like a shawl of some kind, which also is dehumanizing.
On the other side is the one very brief moment where the U.S. soldier like slips coming out of the door he was sneaking out of, and there's two people waiting there. I guess a father and his son, and because he slips, the kid opens fire, accidentally hits his father instead of the soldier, and then like immediately goes and rushes to him, and that's a brief moment of like, oh my god, look what this war has done to people, that a kid is holding an AK-47 and accidentally kills his father with it.
Yeah. Right. There's a few moments like that. There's like, it's just a man carrying like a child's body across the street later in the film. There's stuff like that is just showing around the edges of the movie. Like, oh, by the way, like you've left a big bloody footprint on this city, and this is, and like for what, you know,
right.
Like that's ultimately the thing. Is it's like, okay, we lost a bunch of our people, killed a bunch of civilians, killed 1,000 Mogadishu soldiers who,
I mean, that
like,
we have to put that word in quotes.
I was trying to verbally put quotes on it because it's like, what is the difference? You like, everyone is basically press gang. They're basically held handed an AK-47 or something even worse than that, and told like, go attack those elite American soldiers with rifles and lots of training. And so, yeah, it's just like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. This is horrible. It was, I think that's another reason it landed so poorly at that moment, because we were like, no, we want you to make us feel good about going to war.
Right. Again, the idea that this movie came out, like when I saw this movie came out in 2001, I was like, oh, certainly before September, right? Like that was where my brain eventually went. Like certainly before 9/11. Like imagine releasing a movie like this in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And no, it did not. It was in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And that's why I think the majority of people that saw it had the take that we had when we first saw it, which is, America, fuck yeah, these are our boys. Isn't it terrible how these monsters out there are shooting and killing them? We need to go out there and get back at them. Like that one fucking soldier, Matt, the one that like barely survives, and the first thing he says is like, don't go back out there without me. And I'm like, what are you? No. No, that's no. You almost died. Just chill.
And you almost died for nothing. So like,
for nothing. Yeah.
Like why do you want to go? Yeah. It's I don't know. I actually think that like our cultural way of thinking and talking about these things has actually become more sophisticated, because we just
definitely
didn't have the machinery. I mean, even the like you were saying earlier, like the critics at the time didn't have the like conceptual machinery to really unpack the movie the way I'm pretty sure it was intended to be. Because I don't think I'm being hubristic to say I'm pretty sure that what we're saying right now is the intentional correct interpretation of the film.
I think so. Yeah.
It was just like it didn't land that way at the time, because it was like the absolute wrong time for a big anti-war, anti-American interventionism film to come out.
Yeah. So the only way you can process it is by just turning it into a pro-war one, actually.
Yeah.
It remains completely wild to me that this movie came out when it did. But I mean, I think overall it's good. I guess the question I have for you though, as we get to the end of our conversation, is why do you think Ridley Scott made this movie at this time? Like if we look over his filmography here, like he's done a military movie, I guess technically with G.I. Jane, But he'd never done something on this kind of scale, and I don't think he's ever. Everything that's historical that he's done up until this point had been, ancient history,
Yeah.
a long, long
Right.
time ago.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, okay, first of all, I just want to mention that G.I. Jane just seems like such a piece of crap compared to this movie.
I agree.
Like it's
I
shocking
agree.
that they're the same director, actually.
Yeah.
Because this is so well executed. And like the action in G.I. Jane was like second unit bullshit.
The action was an afterthought. That G.I. Jane is not a movie about the fighting, so they didn't put, I don't think Ridley Scott put a lot of thought into that. In this movie, the fighting is the movie.
Yeah.
So he put a lot more thought into it for sure.
And then obviously he gained a lot of experience in filming large chaotic battles with Gladiator.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where he picked up maybe like the desire or the bee in his bonnet to do something like this, because he kind of maybe started to see how you would do that, how you would shoot something that chaotic and intense and big,
Yeah.
That's all I got really in terms of like why he would want to do this. I think Gladiator was kind of formative. He obviously made a ton of money with it and was like, well, I bet I can do that again, except I can do like a modern war movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly. I mean, obviously, this movie was in production before everything in September happened, right? So, like, this is not a movie that was made in response to 9/11. Certainly not.
Right.
So it is interesting that he decided to attach himself to a project at this time to tell this particular story. Obviously, I think I based on our interpretation, I think that was something that was rather important to him to get that story told. I agree with you that he took the lessons from Gladiator. I think that's very clear here. It is a completely different directorial style from Gladiator, I think we should say, though. Like, he shoots this movie totally differently, and I think he appreciated that challenge as well, probably of doing obviously not a stripped down movie, because this is a huge, complicated. Like, imagine the production on this movie, just like days and days and days and days and days of these kind of incredibly intense sequences. There's very little quiet sequences in this movie, so it must have been a nightmare to shoot. But to do a much dirtier, grimier type of film, I think. Not like, we don't have these beautiful vista shots, these beautiful, still camera shots. Everything seems handheld. Everything is down in the dirt with the actors. I think he probably relished getting to try something like that, because I mean, if one thing we've learned about Ridley Scott throughout these 13 movies is he doesn't really like to do the same thing over and over again, even when he does a movie of a similar genre or type. They are distinctly different in interesting ways.
Yeah. Now it's interesting about the colors, right? Like, this movie is like brown and yellow and beige and camo colored, whereas Gladiator is like bright flashes of gold and silver and red and blue, and it's very different, very, very, very different visually in a lot of ways.
This movie didn't do very well, which is surprising to me. I think I just kind of assumed it did better than it did, but I mean, it made money and made $173 million on a $92-ish million budget, which is close to making. I mean, like they always say double the budget for marketing, right? I don't know if that marketing apparatus was as huge as it was in 2001, so maybe doubling the budget is not accurate, but it probably eked out a little bit of a profit after everything was said and done, but not huge. Which again surprises me. I mean, if you look at, like, we did say it's a January release, right? Which January, at that time frame, it's not really so much anymore, but at that time frame, January, February was like the place to dump movies. So I do wonder if the studio looked at this movie they had and said, we can't release this thing. 9/11 just happened. It's like, well, we're not gonna just completely scrap it, because what kind of stupid studio would completely scrap an entirely completed film? Batgirl. So we're not going to completely scrap it, but we don't want to put our full force behind it. So let's kind of bury it in the doldrums of January and February. And I guess that's what happened, because it did all right, but not fantastic.
I have a theory that I just completely made up out of thin air.
Oh, I love those.
So Josh Hartnett starred in Pearl Harbor, which came out in May 2001. And I think everyone saw that movie, and like, first of all, that movie made like $500 million on a $140 million budget.
Yeah.
And that was a big, America, fuck yeah movie, which happened before 9/11. And it was about Pearl Harbor, the most, obviously America, has been wronged and
one of
justified.
The least complicated war movies you could ever tell. Yeah.
And maybe people were Josh Hartnetted out. And also I think Josh Hartnett is pretty, I think flat is maybe the least mean word that I can think of to use. Like he kind of plays the same character in both movies where he's just like, I'm Josh Hartnett and I'm like a good old American boy and I'm going to do the right thing for America. And it's very, and I think that he actually featured pretty prominently in the marketing for this movie. And my point is that this movie failed because of Josh Hartnett.
Yeah, he's the one on all the posters, that's for sure.
He's the one on all the posters, and I'm like, why? Like, he's not that. Look, I'm just to be honest, there are like 5 other actors in this movie who are like more handsome and heartthrobby than Josh Hartnett. I don't really understand the Josh Hartnett thing, to be frank.
So who would you have made the lead of this movie?
Ewan McGregor.
Well, you can't do that because he's the goofy comedic relief character.
I mean, you could also say Eric Bana. You could say...
Yeah, but see, you can't do that because he's the grizzled, never going to change character.
I mean, structurally, you're right that it has to be Josh Hartnett, but Josh Hartnett is so boring. Like, he's not even like a cool, like Captain America type guy. He's so flat, and like you're just like, okay, it's fine. Like, I'm not saying he did a bad job in this movie. I'm just like, I see Josh Hartnett's face, and I can feel my excitement going down.
Yeah, I mean, he peaked with The Faculty. Everybody knows this.
Everybody knows this. There's, it's also possible that like the movie just did really poorly on word of mouth, because I think if everybody walks out of the theater going like, my God. Yeah,
I mean, it is certainly a choice to make a movie that is intentionally unenjoyable to watch, right? Like that is a bold choice to make, and I respect it as someone who appreciates art. Like, we've talked positively about this movie for almost an hour now. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to the movies, if you like you don't have a lot of time, you can barely get out to the movies these days, and you're like, I'm gonna go see Black Hawk Down, you're just not gonna come out of that movie being like, yeah. Like, compare this to American Sniper, right? A truly awful movie that I actively hate. And I don't hate very many movies, but I think American Sniper is a fucking awful movie. I hate that movie so much. I read the guy's autobiography that it's based on, and he was a terrible human being. He was awful. It's a controversial take. I don't think he was a good person. But that movie was designed to like make you feel good and also sad about this like wonderful American soldier who did all these wonderful things and then was tragically murdered in a stupid way, right? And that movie made like $1 billion. That was super popular movie, because it's designed to make you go, yeah, good job, best sniper ever, love him, tragedy, what happened to him. This movie is just like kind of shrugging at you and going like, I don't know, man, this all just seems stupid, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't leave you with that. So yeah, I can imagine word of mouth doing that for sure.
Right. I mean, it's funny. We're going to talk about another action movie in a few minutes, and it's like, yeah, like it really does matter how a movie makes you feel regarding how, like, what you tell other people about it.
Yeah, which doesn't minimize the artistic merit of it, right? Like, this is a good movie, but like, when looking at why was it not a financially successful movie, why was it dropped in January? Yeah.
I mean, you and I love action movies, and I've, as I said at the beginning, only saw this movie the one time before when it came out in theaters, because I thought about that artery scene and I thought, nope, don't want to watch that again.
I hope I didn't piss anyone off about Chris Kyle. So read his book.
Yeah.
He brags about murdering people. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I didn't watch the movie and I didn't read the book. I don't know. So
good call.
I think my last closing comment on Black Hawk Down is like it was actually Hans Zimmer, and it was kind of a Hans Zimmery score.
Yeah, I could see that.
There's a lot of sort of the like unaccompanied or barely accompanied ululating vocalist thing that he became enamored with for this period of time. There's also a weird amount of like, I think what was just like chugging electric guitar like motifs that like these basically like an action motif. It's like something very like, I don't know, hackneyed seeming. It wasn't horrible. It didn't like shake me out of the movie, but I was kind of surprised. Like, oh, that's the music? Okay.
Well, maybe I'm misremembering, but aren't those sequences always punctuated by like a huge fuck up or like I feel like it's the movie trying to wrestle itself into being an America fuck yeah movie, and then the events of the thing just completely destroy that. So to me, that was like the American soldiers like trying to reassess control and grab back on the vision of what this mission was supposed to be, and then fuck.
I like your interpretation. It's like that's the Hoo-yah theme, but every time the Hoo-yah theme starts to get going, somebody gets shot in the leg.
Yeah.
And then you have to like pull back. Yeah, no, that's really that's fun.
I don't remember if I'm remembering it completely accurately.
Yeah, I don't either, but I like the idea of that though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good movie, interesting movie for Ridley to make next. God, the early 2000s are such a fascinating series of films for him, right? Because I mean, we look at this, we have Gladiator is the big one, his first $100 million budget movie. It does super well. Then he gets Hannibal. Then he gets this movie. And then after that, he takes a couple years off. And then in 2003 makes Matchstick Men, which will be our next movie, which is like a very small character study film with Nick Cage in it.
Yeah. Another movie that I definitely only watched the one time. So.
Yeah, me too. But I'm looking forward to revisiting it.
Me too.
So I'm really loving this early 2000s Ridley. I'm really enjoying it. Even the movies I didn't like so much, like Hannibal, still having fun here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gladiator, Hannibal, Black Hawk Down. This has been 3 movies in a row that I pretty much just enjoyed. I mean, I think we were pretty critical of Hannibal, but in the moment, I was like down for most of what Hannibal was doing.
Yeah.
It was that second half. You know, we talked about this last time.
Yeah. Definitely. All right, so that is Ridley Scott. As we said, we will be covering his next film, I believe next week, and that movie will be 2003's Matchstick Men. I can't wait to revisit that one. Before we go, Matt, we have a couple quick pieces of homework to do, or work. We're not in school anymore. We don't have homework. The first is we have our results from the vote a couple weeks ago for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I was going to Patreon to pull up what the actual results were, but I don't have to do that, Matt. And do you know why I don't have to do that?
Why is that?
Because for the first time in Doof canon history, we have achieved a perfect score vote. 100% of the people that participated in this vote said yes, Everything Everywhere All at Once is absolutely deserving of being part of the Doof canon. And I think we both completely agree with them.
Yeah. I mean, we loved it. We had a great time talking about it. I think the harshest criticism I levied was like the fact that everyone said it was so good beforehand made my expectations really high.
Uh-huh.
And then it was really good. And that's the problem.
Can we talk about the fact that the googly eye and the donut are yin and yang signs? And I was so mad at myself for not realizing that. And then we saw that I sent you that meme, right? Where it's obviously they're like the exact inverse of each other.
It's definitely there. I mean, the thing that nails it in as a comparison is that they have the thing where Deirdre puts the bagel on her forehead. And then you put the googly eye in the forehead as a contrast, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, the symbols are being juxtaposed. I didn't think of that at all. I didn't really think of the googly eyes as well. No, like that's the funny thing is you do think of the googly eyes as a symbol, and you think of the donut as a symbol, but you don't think of them as being contrasting symbols unless somebody draws your attention to it, and then you're like, oh yeah, so super super obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obvious when pointed out. So
Yeah. It's one of those things where as soon as it's pointed out to you, you hit your head and go, duh, I can't believe I didn't notice that. But you're right. I mean, like, we understood the symbol of the everything bagel. We understood the symbol of the googly eye. We just, for some reason, weren't able to clearly see that those are inverses of each other, which they certainly are. Yeah, man. Great movie. This is one of those ones that I think is going to be on my pretty often rotation where I will revisit them because I just love not only did I love the movie, I just love watching the movie. It's just one of those things. It's just unlike Black Hawk Down. It's just fun. It's a fun, enjoyable, heartwarming experience to watch that movie.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it is a perfect example of what we want the Doof canon to be, which makes me very happy because 100% of people agreed with that. So I think it makes me realize that our listeners are pretty tuned into what we want this whole thing to be.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. It would be funny if our listeners disagreed with us vehemently. I mean, that would be also
that would be really interesting.
Like really fascinating. But this time, no. This time they agreed.
Yep.
Doof.
All right, Matt. One more thing before we go for the week. We have to talk about Prey, the newest Predator movie. I think we're gonna try not to be spoilery in this because it's not like a main section review thing we're doing. But I just wanted to get your feedback on this movie because I think we both watched it last weekend, and it's rare that we both get to watch new movies. So, what did you think of Prey, Matt?
I thought the movie whipped pretty hard. And also rocked. So, it's funny. Like, I was thinking about this while watching Black Hawk Down, actually, that like you and I, as individuals, action movies are important to us. We kind of grew up on action movies.
Yeah.
I think about the fact that like a disproportionate number of the movies that I think like, oh, I got to show my kids this movie someday are actually action movies. I just love action movies. I love these sort of like make you feel awesome and have like fun / violent action movies. And so this movie is sort of perfectly made for me, and maybe you also. I don't want to speak for you, but like it was just a delight. Like just like so well put together. Really no major complaints. Some very minor gripes that it's like I don't even care actually. Overall very positive. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I think this is the best Predator movie since Predator, which is so great. I mean, it was directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who also directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is a movie that really surprised me as well, that I was not expecting to like near as much as I did. And I think the movie like is just like functionally well done. Just like in the boring, no one wants to hear about it, like beat to beat of storytelling. Yeah. It just works really well. Like everything is set up and paid off in a satisfactory way. The action is not just action for the sake of action, but it's doing a lot of action as storytelling. Like this is a movie in which there's very little talking, actually. Characters don't speak that often. Obviously, the Predator doesn't speak at all, but our other characters don't talk that much. And so much of who the people are and what they want and how they're achieving those things are told through the action itself. And I think it's remarkably effective at doing that. It's just really fun. It's just really fun to watch. It's gnarly. It's bloody in all the right ways. It's everything Predator should be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it brings you what you wanted from all of those like 5 to 9 Predator sequels we got, depending on whether you count AVP.
I do not.
Yeah, but I mean, like those could be satisfyingly gory at times, but there was not this like cohesive hanging together of like visual storytelling and character and caring about what was happening, and just the heart of what was great about Predator is found here. And some great performances from some like total unknown actors.
Like a full Native American First Nation cast, right? Like completely some people I had never seen before, but did very well. The lead, whose name I'm blanking on right now, I was desperately trying to bring it up while you were talking, but I did not do it fast enough.
So she's great. She's like perfect.
Amber Midthunder is her
Amber
name.
Midthunder. Her brother, the actor who plays her brother in the movie, I thought was like perfect. Like I don't know. Like it's not like it was I don't know. It's just such a great. Man.
It's just really good. Like it's just really good. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I know you like Predator 2 more than me. And I think Predator 2 is a fun movie. I wouldn't say it's a good movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Predator is like a really great example of like an examination of what 80s action films were, right?
Sure.
It's a complete deconstruction of that entire genre, and it's really effective at it. And this is not doing that exact same thing, of course, but it is a perfect example of like, to me, of what like a 2020s action movie should be.
Yeah.
And it's delightful, especially after like, man, the Shane Black movie still breaks my heart every time I think about it. I love Shane Black, and The Predator, the 2018 movie, was just real bad. It was just real bad. And I know it was a film that was like plagued by issues during production. So like that, I can't put all the blame on Shane Black. There was some arguing with the studio going on during this movie, but it was not a good movie.
Yeah. It's pretty disappointing since we have such high expectations of Shane Black.
Mm-hmm. Do you even, I totally forgot there was a Robert Rodriguez Predators movie that came out in 2010.
No, I remember all of these because I am actually a Predator fanboy.
The Adrian Brody film.
The Adrian Brody
remember
one
it at all.
It had Lawrence Fishburne. It had Topher Grace.
Yeah. I forgot I had Walton Goggins in it. I think I remember the Walton Goggins performance. Yeah. That's about it.
Like, it's actually kind of fun. It's just, it's like, you know, you watch it and you're like, yeah, that's fun. It has nothing on this movie. You know, as for Predator 2, like Predator 2 at least is also trying to do something interesting with like, it's sort of trying to do like the 80s, 90s, like gangland violence film, the way that Predator is a send up of like the Macho Man in the Jungle with machine guns film, you know? It's just like, yeah, but it's also just kind of not as good of a movie altogether.
Yeah.
And then
really great Danny Glover performance though, I think.
Really good Danny Glover performance. It's got Bill Paxton, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it has Bill Paxton.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's got a really great Bill Paxton moment. You know, and then I watched all the Alien versus Predator movies, and those have some pretty cool moments that are really just boil down to the predators killing people in cool ways that are fun, which is not like, does not make it a good movie. It's just like, I think I'm giving you a sense of how desperate I've been for any kind of good Predator content, but that's the only reason I'm mentioning this.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I've listened to a lot of interviews with Dan Trachtenberg this week because I was very curious about this movie. And I guess apparently the whole thing was he originally pitched this way back right when the Shane Black film was going to come out. And I guess he saw it in his mind as the Shane Black film was going to start a new Predator series, and that this movie would kind of be the Rogue One to the Predators, The Force Awakens. So that's kind of why the name Prey. That's kind of why the prequel style. Like he saw this as like a spin-off, one-off that was going to have nothing to do with the ongoing series that film was going to create. Then that movie came out and did not do well. And then of course, 20th Century Fox was acquired by Disney. And so that kind of threw any other plans for anything with that up into the air. And I think Trachtenberg kind of gave up on this ever happening. And then he got a call randomly from an executive at Disney that said, no, we're doing this. Which is, I guess where I want to end on this conversation, because I'm at a place here, Matt, where I don't know how I feel, because this movie came out on Hulu this week. It was not a theatrical release. And that is the only reason I saw it. But I really kind of wish I saw this movie in the theater, because this is a big movie. To me, it's very clear this movie is shot for theatrical viewing. Like the way Trachtenberg shoots the vistas, like this is, I think he shoots like, I think this takes place in the Great Plains, right? So like they might have shot in Montana or something. Like there's this beautiful, like flat landscapes of the Great Plains, America. It's absolutely beautiful. It's big. It's expansive. It's a big movie. It's a movie that demands to be seen super loud on a big screen with a full crowd that's reacting to every gnarly kill. And we didn't get to do that. We saw it at home on our nice but not big screen TV. While my wife was sitting on the couch next to me with her phone out. So I'm torn about this because I would not have gone to the theaters to see this movie. I don't go to the theater that often anymore because of my kid. So I just can't. And I would not have seen this movie otherwise. So I'm happy I got to see this movie, but man, I wish I saw it in a theater is where I'm at.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess I feel the same. I feel similarly anyway. I might have managed to go see this if it were in the theater, but I wouldn't have felt a huge amount of urgency. But the fact that it was just on Hulu, I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, that sounds great. I'll put that on. And then it was actually really good. So.
I still don't understand the business model of a lot of the streaming stuff. And I think one of the things we're seeing in streaming news is perhaps all the investors no longer understand the business model. Because I look at a movie like this and I'm like, how do you figure out how much money this made?
Okay. I mean, I don't know if we want to see. I don't. Okay. My theory is actually that for the last like 2 or 3 years, the whole film industry has basically been WeWork, where it was fun. It's been funded by investors, not funded by expectation of monetary reward. What they're trying to do is these streaming platforms are trying to like scrounge out their toehold in the space, and it's like okay, we're spending a bunch of money to like make a name for ourselves in streaming, and we're not going to make that money back this year or next year. It's not like releasing this movie, this Pixar movie or Prey on streaming is going to actually be a financially sound decision in and of itself. The point of it is that we're going to spend this money now, and we're going to have a toehold in streaming, and then and then like ... profit is the actual. And it's like, oh, you didn't actually know how you were going to monetize this. You just kind of hoped that you would like figure that out later. And I'm sorry to say, I actually believe that.
But it's Disney. They know how to monetize this stuff. They've done it.
Yeah, they know, but do they know how to monetize? I don't know that they know how to monetize streaming. I mean, one thing about Disney is apparently they're opening up a free ad-supported version of Disney Plus, and I'm like, well, that makes sense. Actually, that's like the first goddamn thing that's made sense in years.
Yeah, that's where they're all going. Netflix is doing it too.
Yeah. So you're just going back to this is TV. It's just internet TV with commercials. Yeah. Like, okay, so what was this intermediate period just like to trick us all into being okay switching over to streaming so that you could just turn it back into TV with commercials?
Yeah, except no middleman anymore of the networks.
And I guess that's kind of fine. And the companies that kind of made it through the gauntlet now get to reap the rewards, such as they are. But no, I really think that there never was a plan to like make money off of things this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a lot of people just looked at how like in demand this kind of entertainment was and said, oh, well, there's got to be money here, so let's invest a shit ton of money in it. And then when the smoke clears, you're like, wait a minute, where's the money? Right. And there's no money. And so, I mean, I think we've talked about this several times, but I do think we're on the cusp of some real changes in how this whole thing is going to work. I mean, we didn't talk about it last week. We were supposed to, but then our technical difficulties messed it up. But everything that's happening with Discovery and HBO Max right now is kind of insane in that these companies, like a company like AT&T bought Warner Brothers Studios and HBO and just like assumed that something money, and they were not the company to manage any of that stuff at all. And then a new company has taken over in Discovery and is just like saying, oh, no, we're going to cancel all this shit because turns out none of this is going to actually make us any money. And they're trying to and they're just consolidating. Of course, they are consolidating everything. I think the interesting thing about Prey is it appears on Hulu, which is, I think majority owned by Disney. But because of it's only majority owned, they haven't found a way to roll Hulu into Disney Plus, which seems like it makes sense as the end goal for this stuff. Like if you have, like, it feels weird to be a company that's owning and operating two different streaming services at the same time. I don't know where any of this ends, but it's just a wild, we're in the death of the wild west of streaming right now. And I don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years.
I don't think it's going to look like it looks now.
No.
I don't think we're going to have a bunch of services that we're paying $10 a month for. I think there's going to be a lot more of this, like, maybe we'll be paying $10 a month for almost nothing. Maybe one of them will be paying more than $10 a month, and then the rest of them will just be watching for free with commercials. Because I got to tell you, I don't actually mind that. Like I've done that a few times recently, where there was a movie that was on a streaming service with commercials, and it's like, hey, I can sit through like, I don't know, like five to 8 commercials for the duration of a movie. That's fine.
I think the interesting thing is, like, so much of our TV viewing is second screen viewing. And by that, I mean, we have our phone in our hands.
Yeah.
And like commercial breaks actually build time for that and might increase your ability to pay attention to the thing you're watching.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's true or not. It feels weird to say that. Like, I'm not like celebrating the return of commercials at all. I'm not you, because that's crazy. I would never say that's fine. But
I think it's like, if it's a choice between paying $10 a month for something forever on the off chance that they're going to have one thing I want to watch every 6 months, or just dipping in and watching that thing and it having commercials, I'll choose the latter.
Sure. I think my only fear with the commercial thing is the things that I do watch that have a lot of commercials are live sports. I have YouTube TV, and we watch NBA playoffs when those are going on YouTube TV. And I guess because of the way YouTube TV sells its ad space, it's like, it's just not a large collection of commercials. It's just a smaller bucket of commercials. And so I've seen, like, during the NBA playoffs, I see like the same 7 to 8 commercials like 100 times. And I just go slowly insane over the course of that time period. So I hope that if this is the future, if we're going back to commercials, that it's not this small bucket of a handful of commercials that we're just going to see again and again and again and again.
Well, then at least my kids will know what toys to want.
Yeah, I don't know. I think overall Prey was very good, and I'm glad I got to watch it, because again, I would not have seen it in the theater. So thank you, Disney and Hulu, for making it so all I had to do was click a button. But it's a wild time. I don't know if movies like this are going to be made anymore. Like, I guess, is there going to be movies made anymore that are just like, oh, we're going to put this just on streaming? No, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah,
Bye,
like
Batgirl.
But yeah, we got to talk. I say we got to talk about that, but like, I have to figure that out. Like, I'm so out of the loop on that.
Yeah.
And we don't
here's the only thing I'll say about Batgirl.
Okay.
If it was a good movie, they wouldn't have pulled it.
That makes sense.
Like despite the whole like tax shelter thing, like if it was like a really, really good movie, if like they were looking at the movie and saying, hey, we got something here, no amount of tax write-off would have made them pull the movie. If it was a bad movie, and studios release bad movies all the time, they usually know that they're bad movies, but they think, hey, we can make a buck off them. The person who looked at this bad movie said no. So, I mean, is it sad that all these people worked very hard on this movie that is never going to get to be seen by anyone? Certainly. Does it demonstrate the whole mess that is the DC universe ongoing? Yeah, but it was probably a bad movie.
I think the way to look at this is that they looked at all of their movies for the coming year and we're like, we have to have a tax write-off, so pick the worst movie that we've made this year but haven't released. Yeah, and that was the culprit. So yeah, but
it's okay though, because they're entering season 3 of Pennyworth, the origin of Batman's butler.
Season 3.
Yes. Did you not see the news today? So that show's been going on for 2 years, and it's about to enter season 3. And they just rebranded the name. It used to just be called Pennyworth. And for season 3, they've changed it to Pennyworth, the origin of Batman's butler, which is a hilarious thing because you can see the executive that went, nobody knows who the fuck Pennyworth is. You have to tell people that it's Batman's butler. And so they just changed the name to the origin of Batman's butler.
Well, you know what? To be fair, I didn't even know that there was a Pennyworth show. And that it was beginning its 3rd season, and
Alfred fought in World War II. I don't know if you knew that. He was a spy.
That's so how old is Alfred?
I don't know.
I think we're just gonna have to, at some point they're just gonna have to say that like Bruce Wayne existed in the 80s and 90s as a superhero, because you can't keep modernizing it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, because nobody names their child Bruce anymore.
Yeah, right. So yeah, Prey, great movie.
Great movie.
If you like action movies like me and Scott, you'll love it.
Yeah, you will. You absolutely will. Check it out right now on Hulu, a Disney company. That's all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Black Hawk Down, on Prey, or on anything else we talked about this week, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, on Twitter at doofmedia, or over on our subreddit, that's r/doofmedia, where you will find an episode, a post for this very episode.
Yeah, that's right. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to click subscribe. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
Yeah, they're everywhere now, and so are we. We're everywhere all at once.
No commercials.
No commercials. Brought to you by Disney. If you like what we do here and want to support us because we have no commercials, you can become a patron of Doof Media and support us that way. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels. You get a whole bunch of bonus stuff, including the ability to vote in the nominations for our monthly Doof Canon, which should be coming up here pretty soon, I think. I need to get that form out there. So it's a great time to become a member of the community and get a bunch of cool new stuff.
That's right. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review of the Doofcast helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Yeah, we need more reviews, folks. We've been stuck at 69 reviews for a while,
nice.
which is nice. But there's only so many times you can do that before it just kind of gets it's a little boring.
Yeah,
you just want to spice it up with a good old 70.
Good old 70. Classic 70. Yeah.
What would that even be?
I think we all know.
Yes, and we'll leave you with that. We'll see you folks on next week's episode as we continue our Deconstructing Ridley Scott series. That's right, we're going to be talking about Matchstick Men. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.